Welcome to Word Pictures, a program of discussion and discovery. We examine the stories, events, and persons as described in the Word Pictures, presented in the 66 books of Scripture we know as the Word of God. But what kind of God is pictured here? By reading these stories, some become fearful, others adore. Yet others are just confused. Come, let us see for ourselves in an unrehearsed, no-question-barred discussion with people just like you as we search for the God of these stories. What picture of God will emerge for you? Let's join the discussion right now.
Welcome to our discussion. We're so glad that you have joined us. This time we're going to look at a very short book, but a very interesting book, the book The Song of Solomon. It's short, but boy is it potent. Let's read the first couple of verses. The Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine, because of the fragrance of your good ointments. Your name is the ointment poured forth. Therefore the virgins love you. Draw me away. Do we need this kind of language in the Bible?
Now there's a good question. Why is right in the middle of the Bible there's this love poem? And Solomon says, if you understand the Hebrew, when it says the Song of Songs, that means the most beautiful song of all. How come we don't sing it in church?
Can you just give us a quick overview of what's going to happen in this book, Ken?
Well, let me give you a kind of summary. And again, I'm going to turn to, this is the summary given by Eugene Peterson in his book, The Message Bible, his translation, his paraphrase. He says, we don't read very far in the Song of Songs before we realize two things. One, it contains exquisite love lyrics. Norm, you already found that out, didn't you?
Yeah.
And two, it is very explicitly sexual. The song, in other words, makes a connection between conjugal love and sex, a very important and very biblical connection to make. There are some who would eliminate sex when they speak of love, supposing that they are making it more holy. Others, when they think of sex, never think of love. The song proclaims an integrated wholeness that is at the center of Christian teaching on committed, wedded love for a world that seems to specialize in loveless sex. The song is a convincing witness that men and women who were created physically, emotionally, and spiritually to live in love. At the outset of Scripture we read, it is not good for man to live alone. The Song of Songs, the best song of all, elaborates on the Genesis story by celebrating the union of two diverse personalities in love. We read Genesis and learn that this is the created pattern of joy and mutuality. We read the song and see the goal and ideal toward which we all press for fulfillment. Despite our sordid failures in love, we see here what we are created for, what God intends for us in the ecstasy and fulfillment that is celebrated, and the lyricism of the song. Christians read the song on many levels, as the intimacy of marital love between man and woman, God's deep love for his people, Christ's bridegroom love for his church, the Christian's love for his or her Lord. It is a prism in which all the love of God in all the world and all the responses of those who love and whom God loves gathers and then separates into individual colors. How do you like that?
That's colorful.
That's colorful. So what do we do with this? Some people would say this ought to be XXX rated, but it's right here in the Bible.
The Jews thought it was XXX, didn't they?
What did they say about it?
Well, they wouldn't let anybody read it unless they were 30 years old.
And it was the men who weren't allowed to read it until they were 30 years, and maybe the women weren't allowed to read it at all.
Was this was written by Solomon?
This was written by Solomon. It says so.
Do you know at what stage of his life he wrote this?
There's a couple of clues. If you look at, see if I can spot it real quick here. There's one place where he says, I have how many wives and how many concubines?
I mean, is this a song to his first wife? Is this a song to his 1,000 wives? Is this a song to whatever woman he happened to be with?
Not that either. Let me see if I can find the place where it talks about it. I'll find it here in a moment.
See, my Bible says that in the notes, and I don't know if this is right, Solomon recounts the days of his courtship, the early days of his first marriage, the maturing of the royal couple through the good and bad days of life.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, it's interesting to look back at 1 Kings 4:32. We commented about this last time, but we didn't actually look at the verse, but look at 1 Kings 4, verse 32. He composed 3,000 proverbs and more than 1,000 songs. So now, how many songs, not proverbs, how many songs of Solomon do we have?
Just the juicy one.
Just the juicy one?
Well, the other 999 might have been.
That may not be true. What does your Bible say at the top of Psalm 72? A little inscription at the top there?
Psalm 72.
Psalm 72. What does it say?
Psalm of Solomon.
A Psalm of Solomon. So there are some of these psalms in the book of Psalms that apparently were composed by Solomon. What about Psalm 127?
So a psalm is also a song?
Yes, it's also a song. Look at Psalm 127. What does it say?
Turning.
A song of ascents of Solomon.
Okay? So there are at least 2 psalms in the book of Psalms that were written by Solomon. But he says very clearly that he thinks that this one we call the Song of Songs or the Song of Solomon, he thinks it's the most beautiful one of all. And I mean, you know, it goes on here. And unfortunately, if you just have a King James or a Bible where the text is not divided up, it's a little difficult. But in Hebrew, you can tell based on the gender of the nouns and verbs and so forth, that it divides it up. First of all, the woman speaks, and then the man speaks, and then the woman, the man, the woman, and so forth. In fact, the whole book of Song of Solomon is arranged like a big X, and it comes down like the upper arms are a big X, and it comes down to a point that's sort of the central focus of the whole book, and then it goes back up, and in the first half of the book parallels the last half of the book all the way down, and then all the way back up. And it's called, in Greek, it's called a chiasm.
That's how the book of Revelation is written also.
Yes.
Are there any other books written like that?
Well, there's other portions of books written like that, yes. No other whole entire books that I can think about right away that are written like that, but these 2 are, yes.
What's the center thought?
Okay, the center thought is found in chapter 4, verse 16 through 5, verse 1. And it says, "Wake up, north wind, south wind, blow on my garden, fill the air with fragrance, let my lover come to his garden, eat the best of its fruits. I have entered my garden, my sweetheart, my bride. I am gathering my spices and myrrh. I am eating my honey and honeycomb. I am drinking my wine and milk." And while it's very picturesque kind of language, that's supposed to describe the wedding night. So I don't know how many wedding nights Solomon had.
1,000 wives.
So, but anyway, what do we do with all this I mean, if you read down through here, let's start off with our example, chapter 1, verse 5. "Woman of Jerusalem, I am dark, but beautiful. Dark as the desert tents of Kedar, but beautiful as the draperies in Solomon's palace. Don't look down on me because of my color, because the sun has tanned me. My brothers were angry with me and made me work in the vineyard. I had no time to care for myself. Tell me, my love, where will you lead your flock to graze? Where will they rest from the noonday sun? Why should I need to look for you among the flocks of other shepherds?" And so forth. So there's been a lot of argument. And I should say, I mean, to be honest, I should say that many people, starting with Augustine, was a great allegorist. And he wanted to make this whole psalm an allegory. And each little part meant something. And it was a song about God's love for his church and so forth like this. It has nothing to do with human sexuality at all. Of course, if you know Augustine's story, that wouldn't surprise you probably too much.
Was Solomon's first wife a dark lady who worked in the fields and
Solomon's first wife was a daughter of Pharaoh, an Egyptian. Yeah.
And did this fit her?
Not really. That's one of the arguments here. I mean, what's going on here? It is believed that if you take this to be sort of a literal story about about true human love between a man and a woman, the idea would be this was a young lady. It looks like she came from the northern part of Israel, and that she was a little darker, maybe because she had spent her childhood out tending sheep and working the vineyard, etc., so she was more tanned. But apparently, after all these foreign princesses, Solomon found somebody he was really kindred spirits with, and this was the real love of his life. That's one interpretation of all this. There
is one very slight reference to things pertaining to Egypt. If you look at verse 9, it says, "You, my love, excite men as a mare excites the stallions of Pharaoh's chariots."
Yeah.
That could be. It's an interesting. If it doesn't have something to do with an Egyptian connection there, why wouldn't he say King Solomon's horses or King David's horses or something like that? So it's.
Well,
also, women kind of exaggerate, like she could just be a little bit tan and, oh my, look at me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Self-conscious about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wish she was
a
little better in appearance in her own mind.
Well, of course, it talks about the cheeks. It talks about her beautiful breasts. It talks about, on all the way down, her eyes and so forth. It's interesting that it uses references, for example, to En-Gedi in chapter 1, verse 14. "My lover is like the wildflowers that bloom in the vineyards at En-Gedi." Where was En-Gedi?
No idea. Where was it?
Yeah, it's down in the southern part of, down by the Dead Sea, not too far from the Dead Sea, west of the Dead Sea, down really basically in the desert. And in other places it talks about the Lebanon mountains in chapter 4, verse 15. And one of the reasons why they think it may have been written by Solomon is because all through here there are references to things and to areas in the country that seem to be. It doesn't look like it's written by someone who lived at a time when there was a southern kingdom and a northern kingdom, but it talks about things in the south and it talks about things in the north, just like they're all part of the same country. So that's one of the arguments that this probably was written by Solomon.
And someone who was familiar with the entire domain.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I was looking here, there's a place where it talks about the Heshbon, the pools of Heshbon. Yes, look at chapter 7. We read what the woman said about the man, but look at chapter 7 here. What a magnificent young woman you are. How beautiful are your feet in sandals. The curve of your thighs is like the work of an artist. A bowl is there that never runs out of spiced wine. A sheaf of wheat is there, surrounded by lilies. Your breasts are like twin deer, like two gazelles. Your neck is like a tower of ivory. Your eyes are like the pools in the city of Heshbon, near the gates of that great city. And in fairly recent years, a friend of ours has been digging in Heshbon as an archaeological find and found those very pools that he's talking about here.
Where was Heshbon? Was there something unusually beautiful about these pools? Was it way out in the desert? And so when you came there, this pool was, my goodness, it was a wonderful.
Mm-hmm. And Heshbon was way over in what we would call today Jordan. And it was at a time when, therefore, it had to be at a time when the kingdom of, Solomon's kingdom, remember, from when David passed away, they ruled the territory from Egypt to the Euphrates.
Were these pools widely known? So when he's referring to this, if someone were to read this book in his day, they would have an identity with those pools that say, yes, it's not just some distant thing they didn't understand like maybe we do as we sit around here at the table.
Southwest of Amman, Jordan now, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I don't know. The women must have understood differently, and this version is different than what you read. Your navel is like a round goblet. Your belly is like a heap of wheat fenced about with lilies. And the flowing locks of your head are like purple threads.
Yeah. Okay.
Or is there a passage here that talks about the teeth being like sheep, a flock of sheep or something?
Yeah.
And you have to be kind of a poet to define what it's talking about. They're all there. They aren't. There's not anything missing.
Well,
now, isn't this when a couple is in love, isn't this kind of reflect their feelings toward one another? They're quite enamored with everything about this person. They're almost kind of entranced or something like that. It could be said. And
I have a friend who's a pastor, and he teaches marriage classes. And he says he hopes that he can get to the young people before they're so gone that they won't listen to any kind of logic. So,
but I would venture to say that in a deep marriage, even a marriage of many years, that the people would feel this way about their loved one. That we have a tendency to grow old, and yet these people still look young in our sights in many ways.
Yeah.
Chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. Like an apple tree among the trees of the woods, so is my beloved among the sons. I sat down in his shade with great delight, and his fruit was sweet to my taste. He brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love. Now listen where Ellen White goes with that. Take time with Jesus, not a pause for a moment in his presence, but personal contact with Christ, to sit down in companionship with him. This is our need. Happy will it be for the children of our homes and the students of our schools when the parents and teachers shall learn in their own lives the precious experience pictured in these words.
Well, what about that? Is it possible this is all an allegory? We've talked about it as if it's an honest presentation of human love.
This Bible says a more satisfying way to approach Solomon's song is to take it at face value and interpret it in the like that it is about love and marriage. That many interpreters have tried to make it an allegorical, but it really doesn't fit.
I have, along this line, Ken, I've been thinking recently, and it's not like I have a great body of literature. These are my own thoughts, but I have wondered in recent times if everything around us isn't an allegory of what God is like. When you see a daisy or a petunia or a rose, that there may be a great understanding about God that we're just missing because we don't understand these things. And now when I talk about a petunia or a rose or a beautiful flower, but I've often wondered if there isn't something just even in a rock, if there's not something we don't understand, if everything around us explains to us what God is like. It's everything He has made is a manifest testimony of His character and what He is like.
Well, are we supposed to learn something from human love? if you look through the Bible, there are innumerable references to the relationship between God and His people, and it's like, most commonly, it's likened to a marriage. And sometimes
the church is often referred to as His bride.
Let me just mention it. We don't have time to read these things, but Isaiah 5, Isaiah 54, Jeremiah 2, Jeremiah 3, Jeremiah 31, Ezekiel 16 and 23, and those are very interesting passages. It talks about God marrying two wives. They're like the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah, and they're acting like prostitutes. And you know, you hardly imagine God being described as being married to a prostitute, but there it is. And the whole book of Hosea, and then Matthew 9 and 25, and John 3, and 2 Corinthians 11, Ephesians 5, and Revelation 21, and we could go on. Many, many times in the Bible, God uses marriage as a type, if you will, of God's love for His people, for the church, and so forth like this. So it,
Even when the righteous get to heaven, they sit down to the
marriage supper,
marriage supper of the Lamb.
and they're the bride.
And they are the bride. That's right.
You know, God is love. And I heard a person say that Satan came to put selfishness in the world wherever he could. And so when you see love, that's God, and then you observe how Satan has corrupted it. And the Song of Solomon seems like it is a total giving of them, each person to the other, total love. You don't see any selfishness in the Song of Solomon. And maybe God is saying, you know, this is what I designed things to be, but selfishness has come into the world, so you don't really see this heartfelt love that much anymore.
Yeah.
I'd like to comment on Jay's comment. And I think I would continue with that and say that the more we study of Jesus, of His love and His goodness, and understand Him more, the more frequently we can make that connection with the things that He's made down here.
Yeah. Well, and now let's come back to the human love kind of idea in this respect. That who invented that to start out with?
Oh, God did.
What was God's intent? I mean, you know, he put Adam and Eve in the garden, and they were wearing robes of light.
To repair,
He told them, multiply and fill the earth with children.
To make up for the third that he lost.
Yeah.
I like that
idea.
concept, the idea, you know. God has a plan, but he had a little detour.
Yeah.
But they didn't catch him by surprise. He knew what was coming, so it was all planned for before he created.
When God created, did He create everything with the idea of giving practice in being loving and unselfish? So He had to create a woman for a man and a man for a woman. He had to create plants that served each other, and
all teaching aids to understanding about the way the Creator works.
So
Insights into
how did we get from the absolutely beautiful relationship created by God for Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden to living in a society where sex is primarily used or perverted and sold for advertising and personal gratification? What happened?
Well,
That's what the adversaries works out.
it is through the sexual relationship that you reproduce after your own kind. This is a remarkable gift. I mean, God created us in His image, and He created in a way after His own kind, and He has created us so much like Him that He's given us the ability to create after our own selves. And I think Satan is very unhappy about that. He is, now perhaps I don't understand the full scope of things, but I think Satan is unhappy that he cannot create after himself as we can for ourselves.
Aren't you thankful?
He seeks to he seeks to do that. He seeks to make us like Him by by trying to alter our character so that our character is like him. But I think he's very jealous that I've got to be careful carrying that too far, because, you know, even rabbits and squirrels can do this as well, and maybe that's why they suffer so much in this world as well. But and I don't know if there's other biblical pictures of what other planets are like, or other places where other creatures are, but it is quite plain that God has intended to create us in His image, and we have the ability to create in our image as well.
There's a couple of things I would say about that I think are very significant. First of all, if God needs 1,000,000 angels, He makes 1,000,000 angels. If God needs 1,000,000 human beings, He makes 2 and says, reproduce. What does that tell us about God?
You asked the question, how did we get from to where we are?
From the beautiful to the perversion.
That's right. When wickedness gets rid of God, they haven't gotten rid of sex.
No.
What are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
Well, you know, also in Eden, you depended on God. There wasn't any money. So maybe Satan invented money, so you don't have to depend on God. You could depend on yourself as long as you got enough money. And then you use the things of God to make money, such as sex and maybe other things God created, and then you don't have to depend on God.
Isn't sex just an expression of intimacy? I mean, well, that's really what it is. We human beings are just more physical at it than maybe the angels are, but the angels are very intimate with each other. They're intimate with God. We're intimate with God. It's just
Somehow there's
just
a difference, though, because they don't
it's just
reproduce
physical.
themselves.
It's just a physical thing. But I don't really understand what this great thing is about reproducing. I don't really understand why Satan would even be jealous of that.
Well, think of what a mess
I mean,
we
I
would
know
be.
what you're saying, but I still don't see.
Satan has wanted to create from day one. The furthest back we can read anything about him, he's wanted to be able to create.
Yeah, but
And
if
he's
you
not
really
been able
think
to.
about it, creating a baby is not really creating.
Well,
It's procreating.
it's about as close to creating as a human can get.
To what, though? To life? I mean, what's the purpose?
Yeah, to life.
I mean, I think the biggest thing to understand here is that God is giving us an experience to be like Him to these youngsters.
Yeah,
And to understand
Yeah.
what He has to go through.
Exactly.
You know, for that
yes.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
We're just doing it a different way. It's not
So-
really a big deal. I don't think it's anything that's really special to humankind. We just do it a different way.
Do you think God, which came first, and we're running out of time for our first half of our program, but which do you think came first? Human love and sexuality or sin?
Well,
Be
sin.
careful.
Human.
Sin.
Really?
Because it started in heaven before this earth was created, didn't it?
Oh.
So God apparently gave us the ability to procreate as part of the answer to the sin problem. Because we, as parents, have to learn some of the challenges that God has faced in trying to deal with us. Well, we'll talk more about that issue when we come back. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're so glad that you stayed by. We're going to move now from the early times in Solomon's life, when he probably wrote Song of Solomon, and we've already talked about Proverbs, to the very end of Solomon's life, and when he wrote the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, there's several things you need to understand about Ecclesiastes. If it was written way at the end of Solomon's life, what had preceded that? What had happened in his life so far?
A shipwreck.
A shipwreck, okay? He had made a terrible mess of his life, and what happened at the very end? God said, okay, you can come back to me if you divorce all your wives, if you straighten out everything, and you come back, maybe I'll let you sit on the back row in church, right?
No, it's not.
What did he say?
Just come back.
Just come back. You know, it's very interesting. If you look over at 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 21, it comments about the kind of people who write books in the Bible. Have you noticed that?
Holy man of God.
1 Peter 1:21, here we are. I'm sorry, 2 Peter 1:21. It is. For no prophetic message ever came just from the human will, but people were under the control of the Holy Spirit as they spoke the message that came from God. You think Solomon was under the control of the Holy Spirit when he wrote Ecclesiastes? What do we know about Ecclesiastes?
At what stage of his life did he write it? In the last stage?
Clear at the very end.
Was he repentant when he wrote it, or was he not yet repentant?
No, he was repentant.
Sounds
After he'd offered his babies to the god Moloch.
And so forth.
And then felt repentant about it?
Well, listen, these are the kind of words he uses. This is a sort of, in the first couple of verses is a kind of summary of the whole book. These are the words of the philosopher, David's son, who was king of Jerusalem. It is useless, useless, said the philosopher. Life is useless, all useless. Okay, now we can close our Bibles and go home. Now you've heard the book of Ecclesiastes, right? By the way, what does Ecclesiastes mean?
The preacher.
The preacher. And where does it come from?
Oh, the Hebrew word is koheleth.
Yeah. Ecclesiastes is a Greek word. How did it get that name?
Well, it must have been.
Comes in, the Hebrew root is kahal, assembly, and means one who conducts an assembly or school.
Yeah. Ecclesiastes is the preacher, and this was the name given to it when the first Greek translation of the scriptures was made, known as the Septuagint. Correct.
It's the reflections of a philosopher rather than the testimony of belief.
So the name never went back to
Correct.
its original Hebrew.
No.
You know, well, go on there and read some more. You spend your life working, laboring, and what do you have to show for it? Generations come, generations go, but the world stays just the same. The sun rises, goes down, going wearily back to where it must start all over. Wind blows south, wind blows north, round, back again. Talks about the seas and so forth, and this is really the way it kind of, in certain ways, it is. I wonder if you know, I remember as a young teacher having some great ideas, and the old teachers just kind of looking at me like they were thinking, well, been there, done that. I am a teacher, and every year we get, let's say, new freshmen, and maybe they're in geometry class, and every year we have to teach that crazy Pythagorean theorem over again. You would think, you know, they've learned it now, so why do we have to teach it again? It's because we get new generations all the time. And you know, I wouldn't be surprised if we're just starting out here, but as I first read this, and I've read this book before, I just kind of wonder if Solomon had a whole lot of high hopes, and some of those were successful, but some of the old failures that, you know, it just repeats itself. You just It just comes back over and over again. Each generation, you think you've learned something, but how many times have we had to learn that, war doesn't solve problems?
Yeah.
Every time we get a generation of new young people, why, they think, well, let's solve problems that way. Is this part of what Ecclesiastes may be referring to here?
This is kind of depressing. I think when you're older and you're sitting on your rocking chair, you think of the good things that you have accomplished, even though maybe it hasn't been that much, but you think of the projects you've done. Maybe the fields of food he's raised and fed other people. Don't you reflect on what you have accomplished in life? And he seems like, I've done nothing. I mean, he made some good decisions, but...
Take my son or any child, when they're first learning to walk, they fall down and bang their heads. And they learn not to do that anymore. and so they get much better at it. But then they have children, and there's another generation that comes along, and you can sit down on the sofa as they're just learning to walk, and you can give them all kinds of good guidelines. Watch out for this, and always make hold, you've got a hold of something, and stay away from the glass top table, and don't touch the stove, and all of that stuff. And they look at you like, if you were to do this when they're just, very seriously and honestly, like, well, I'll do the best I can with their own little minds, but then they wander off and they make these blunders.
But this is like, what advantage does a man have in all his work? Well, there's someone that built the Proton Center, and he can say, this is the advantage of all my work, and it's going to be here, and it has served people. I just don't think Solomon is looking at what he might have done that will...
This guy's a depressed character.
Look at
Okay,
this.
maybe
Look at the first chapter here. Let's just take some examples.
Like about verse 13.
How much of this is even true? Does the sun really go down and come back up again? We know that the earth is spinning around. It has nothing to do with the sun going down and coming. And every river flows into the sea, but the sea is not yet full. Is that really true? Everything leads to weariness, a weariness too great for words. Our eyes can never see enough to be satisfied. Our ears can never hear enough.
Maybe his.
Yeah.
Verse 13. I set my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven. Now, in what way is he using the word wisdom there?
Yeah.
Is it if it's by intellect and by exercising my abilities, then he's doomed to failure, and this is a marvelous expose of what kind of failure that is.
At the end of that verse in my Bible, it has a great expression, God has laid a miserable fate upon us. Do we agree with that?
No.
I have seen everything done in this world, and I tell you, it is all useless. It is like chasing the wind. You can't straighten out what is crooked. Would the orthodontists agree with that? You can't count things that aren't there. Would the physicists agree with that?
By his own bitter experience, Solomon learned the emptiness of a life that seeks in earthly things its highest good. In his later years, turning wearied and thirsting from earth's broken cisterns, Solomon returned to drink at the fountain of life. The history of his wasted years, with their lessons of warning, he, by the spirit of inspiration, recorded for after generations. So his nonsense is here for us to look at and avoid.
Look at chapter 3. Everything that happens in this world happens at the time God chooses. He sets the time for birth and the time for death, the time for planting and the time for pulling up, the time for killing and the time for healing, the time for tearing down and the time for building. He sets the time for sorrow and the time for joy, the time for mourning and the time for dancing, the time for making love and the time for not making love, the time for kissing and the time for not kissing. He sets the time for finding and the time for losing, the time for saving and the time for throwing away, the time for tearing and the time for mending, the time for silence and the time for talk. He sets the time for love and the time for hate, the time for war and the time for peace. Is that true?
A lot of
Does
that.
God intend a time for war, for example?
War, God can bring good out of war, but it is definitely the humans on earth that make a time of war, and maybe God makes a time of peace, but a lot of that can be blamed on our own selves.
And there's a theme that goes through Ecclesiastes in several places. The first place I think it's found is chapter 3, verse 13. All of us should eat and drink and enjoy what we have worked for. It is God's gift. Eat and drink and enjoy what we've worked for. It is God's gift.
Doesn't sound depressed to me.
Yeah?
Well, but that he set out to find out by wisdom. Man cannot by searching find out God. Let none seek with presumptuous hand to lift the veil that conceals his glory. No mortal mind can penetrate the secrecy in which the Mighty One dwells and works. He was trying to do without God what can only be done with God in God's time and place.
Well, he tried to create happiness for himself by great buildings. He did some great buildings, but it didn't bring him the ultimate happiness. He tried to create happiness for himself by marrying lots of women, and he found that didn't work. He created choirs. He created all sorts, and that didn't do the job. He made beautiful gardens, and I'm sure they were nice, but it wasn't the ultimate source of happiness. He goes on through, he just does all kinds of those kinds of things, and he says it's not the ultimate solution. What was the problem? He left God out.
That's how this chapter speaks to me, is we think and we see, well, this person, or we try to keep up with the Joneses, they have everything, and he did. In the world's eyes, he had everything, but he was missing the one most important thing, which he did have in the beginning. And
Well, some people have said that when you win the lottery, actually you've lost. A lot of people have gotten to be able to do anything they wanted to, and they turn out miserable, having miserable lives over that. Now, why is that? Especially Hollywood people. Look at Hollywood people. They have everything they ever want. They can do anything they want to do. They can go after everything that can make them happy, and yet they're the most wretched, unhappy people in the whole world.
Yeah.
Why? What is happening there?
Yeah.
I mean, the same thing is happening with Solomon here, because he's kind of in that same position.
Proverbs 13:11. Wealth hastily gotten will dwindle, but he who gathers little by little will increase it.
Increase it.
Maybe in God's design, we need rules and we need fence posts for ourselves. And when we ourselves take away the rules and the fence posts, we just shipwreck ourselves.
But most of all, we need to maintain that connection with Him. He abandoned that connection. And then he describes all the stuff that he did without that connection. And he's absolutely right in the first verses when he says, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanities. All useless. Done the way he did it.
Well, I think God is the true source. I mean, people need to understand that. It's not only do they need to be told that, they need to understand it for themselves. You can't get the stuff through other places, because it always comes up short.
He was always looking for happiness. And my chapter 7 has a title above it called Thoughts About Life. Look at the first 4 verses of chapter 7. A good reputation is better than expensive perfume, and the day you die is better than the day you were born. Would you agree with that?
That's a miserable
Maybe none of us have died yet, so we're not sure.
Well, I don't know. You look at my daughter. She really went through a lot when she was born.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good thing she didn't remember it, because man, she was.
It is better to go to a home where there is a mourning than to one where there's a party, because the living should always remind themselves that death is waiting for us all. Sorrow is better than laughter. It may sadden your face, but it sharpens your understanding.
Well, he's a real ray of sunshine, isn't he?
Someone who is always thinking about happiness is a fool. A wise person thinks about death.
Now,
I mean,
wait
you
a
know-
minute. Are we supposed to get wisdom from this type
Well,
of...
why is it in the Bible? That's the question.
It's the end of Solomon's life. This is the wisdom he got.
I would rather have heard about Moses talking about the last of his life or something like that than...
For verse 13, better is a poor and wise youth than an old and foolish king who will no longer take advice.
Mhm.
And that kind of
Yeah.
sums up his...
Well, one of the most puzzling verses or sections, is a couple of verses, in the whole book is chapter 7, verses 16 to 18. What do you make of this? So don't be too good or too wise. Why kill yourself? But don't be too wicked or too foolish either. Why die before you have to? Avoid both extremes. If you have reverence for God, you'll be successful anyway. So you don't want to be too good, too righteous, right? Just like you don't want to be... So we should be somewhere in the middle of the road. Not too good, not too evil, sort of lukewarm, kind of Laodicean, right?
No, I think Solomon's life was an extreme, wasn't it?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, he had everything he wanted, everything you could ever dream of. He could do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's kind of an extreme there, and he's coming up with these extreme conclusions.
Mm-hmm. Well, look at the verse that follows, a couple of verses down, verse 20. There's no one on earth who does what is right all the time and never makes a mistake. What does that tell us?
Your
He's
RSV
right.
says never sins.
He's right. What?
Your RSV says and never sins.
Yeah, exactly. This is the Old Testament version of Romans 3:23, isn't it? Yeah. Well, I used my wisdom, verse 23 of verse 7, I used my wisdom to test all this. I was determined to be wise, but it was beyond me. So is that what really happened in the life of Solomon? How can anyone discover what life means? It is too deep for us, too hard to understand. But I devoted myself to knowledge and study. I was determined to find wisdom in the answers to my questions and to learn how wicked and foolish stupidity is. I found something much bitter than death, the woman who is like a trap.
He
The
must
love
have-
she- what?
He must have had problems with women.
Well, 1,000. How could he not have problems with them? The love she offers you will catch you like a net, and her charms around you will hold you like a chain. A man who pleases God can get away, but she will catch the sinner.
Is he saying this because these women led him to set up false worship to false gods? And he's saying, they chained me, But you know, he should really take responsibility for his own actions.
Yeah.
Good grief.
Yeah, you're right.
Yes, says the
Like
philosopher.
Adam blamed Eve.
Yeah.
He says, this woman you gave me. Remember when he's talking to God there in the garden?
Yeah, so here we go again.
Yes, says the philosopher, I found this out little by little while I was looking for answers. I have looked for other answers, but have found none. I found one man in 1,000 that I could respect, but not one woman. And he's talking about his 1,000 wives? Maybe so, huh? This is all that I have learned. God made us plain and simple, but we have made ourselves very complicated.
Now, this was written before the Song of Solomon or after? After the Song of
Surely
Solomon?
before.
After, much
end
later.
of
This
his
is
life.
the end of his life. Yeah. Well, he goes on, what do you think about chapter 10, verse 1? Dead flies can make a whole bottle of perfume stink, and a little stupidity can cancel out the greatest wisdom.
Well, that's true.
It is natural for the wise to do the right thing and for fools to do the wrong thing. Their stupidity will be evident even to strangers they meet along the way, and they let everyone know that they are fools. So why is all this stuff in the Bible?
Is this to show what happens when you don't live God's way?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, I think that's exactly
You
what
get a
we're talking
confused mess?
No, he's very wise at this point.
about. Yeah.
I like how about the one, chapter 10, verse 19.
Mm-hmm.
Bread is made for laughter, and wine gladdens life. Money answers everything.
Yeah. There's a lot of versions of that. My Bible says, feasting makes you happy and wine cheers you up, but you can't have either without money. Someone else put it like this, Money can't buy love, but it makes shopping for it a lot more fun.
It says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth before the evil days come. So he was remembering maybe when there were better times, but he left the Creator.
Yeah. What was he trying to say there in the process of leaving? What if Solomon had lived a life like Enoch or even David or Daniel or Moses or Job or John in the New Testament?
Some other idiot would have to write this section.
Some other idiot would have to write this section? Okay. So why do we, there are a lot of books we know about that are actually mentioned in the Bible but were not included in canon. Why was Song of Solomon and Ecclesiastes included?
I would rather read the ramblings of a wise man than the ramblings of someone who has squandered their life and so much that God gave him. I don't know if there's wisdom in reading.
Chapter 12, right at the end of verses 13 and 14. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. That's a rather slavish approach, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really not, you don't get a lot of insight into the Creator God with that miserable summation.
Comparing that as a summary of his life with the end of the book of Job.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think about this? Would you rather have this said about you when you came to the end of your life? Look at Job 42, verses 7 and 8. After the Lord had finished speaking to Job, he said to Eliphaz, I am angry with you and your two friends because you did not speak the truth about me the way my servant Job did. Now take 7 bulls and 7 rams to Job and offer them as a sacrifice for yourselves. Job will pray for you, and I will answer his prayer and not disgrace you the way you deserve. You did not speak the truth about me as he did.
Solomon, it looks to me like Solomon was kind of pummeled into submission.
Solomon never, at least at this point in his life, had gone back and he thought, okay, I've discovered the secret, obey the rules.
Not understand, not become a friend of God. It's not there. It's just.
For God will bring every work into judgment. When the records of heaven shall be opened, the judge will not in words declare to man his guilt, but will cast one penetrating, convincing glance, and every deed, every transaction of life will be vividly impressed upon the memory of the wrongdoer. That's real judgment.
It's kind of hard to understand for me. I don't know.
If you think of every deed of your life that was wrong is going to be impressed upon your heart later. It is a terrifying experience to...
I think that's what kills people. That's what kills humanity. When they realize this, when they understand what they have done, and they understand what they have missed, humanity cannot survive that emotional trauma.
You're talking at the end time.
At the very end time.
They never at any time got to the point where they admired the Creator the way he runs things.
Let me read a paragraph that sort of tries to summarize that. What if Solomon had lived a life like Enoch, Daniel, Moses, Job, John, or even David, his father? What might have been his conclusion to this book? Enoch and Elijah ascended to heaven without tasting death. Moses made some mistakes, but he made it to heaven also. Each of these others, despite their problems, had a relationship with God that could not be shaken. When they came to the conclusions of their lives, they had some great things to say about God and the value of their relationships. Job said of God what was right. Job 42, we read that, 7 and 8. Enoch walked with God. Genesis 5, 21 to 24, and Hebrews 11, 5. Daniel risked his life rather than interrupt his daily communion with God. Daniel 6. Daniel also showed what a real friend of God does when things are not going well. He prayed for God's reputation. Daniel 9, 4 to 19, and especially verses 15 to 19. Moses was jealous for God's reputation on more than one occasion. Exodus 32, 11 to 14, Numbers 14, 11 to 25. John actually realized that God himself wants to treat us like friends. John 15:15 and 16:26. Even David, whenever he recognized his sins, immediately turned to God as a friend in Psalms 51 and Psalm 32. Solomon, by contrast, seemed to be stuck on the basic level of obedience. He said, God is watching everything you do, even in secret, so you better behave. That was the verses, Ecclesiastes 12, 13, and 14.
Yeah.
What do we want to leave as a legacy at the end of our lives? We have been given the privilege of living in the most exciting time in Earth's history. God has given us, as the people living in the final period of Earth's history, the information and capacity, with the help of the Holy Spirit, of course, to finish the gospel and see Jesus return at the second coming. So what are we saying about God? Are we just saying, you better obey the commandments along with Solomon? Are we saying about God what is true, like Moses and Daniel and Job?
And these people clung on to God through their sins. And that God is a God that you can hang on to during your sins, and He will help.
Well, and one thing for sure that Solomon's saying is that it isn't where he went.
Yeah,
As far
exactly.
that's for sure.
God will do everything possible to save everyone who is safe to save. Everyone who is safe to live next door to for the rest of eternity. But God is not willing to just let us go without a fight. He will do His best to impress upon us that what we are doing is serious. He may even threaten to take us to court for a trial. But when it is all over, He always respects our freedom. It may seem embarrassing to admit to God the truth about even the secret things in our lives, but we somehow hope, our lives that we somehow hope will always remain secret. But the Bible makes it very clear that God knows all about us already. So it is much better for us to speak honestly to Him about our foibles. Solomon barely got to that point at the end of his life, and he could have been the pinnacle with the way he started out. And yet he made a mess of his life. He ended up being a fool. And we certainly don't want to follow that example now, do we? See you next week.